so I'll just have some introduction. So we're going to talk today about one of the areas of true storytelling, and I'm going to question what is true and what is storytelling, and then we're going to talk about being a truth teller. So apparently we're now live. So I had a revelation this week. I seem to have revelations every week, but it's the way I'm wired. I started to think about that if you start to define what is true, true is accurate and correct and genuine and authentic and verifiable and certifiable and all the rest of that, and evidentiary. And then if you look at storytelling, it's not any of those things really. It's about generating imagination space for your listeners with metaphors and phrases and little images and pictures and whatever. And so when I'm telling a story and I'm about embellishing for effect and drawing in other metaphors I think will connect to the audience, I'm not being very true to the specifics of the story as I recall it. Nor can I recall the whole story anyway, because who recalls everything they lived through, even if it's a trauma? I work a lot with veterans with post-traumatic stress, and they recall something, but it's all out of proportion and it takes over their whole life. So I guess the trauma is true. They had an experience true for them. So that's the topic today. Is I want to look at this, what is true, and tell you a little bit about some directions I'm taking, and I got some questions coming up. So if you stay tuned out there in YouTube land, that's what you're going to get. So one of the things about being a truth teller is whether or not we can have truth, or do we have just a whole bunch of different truths? So let me share some of the images here. So let's see. Let's start with this one. So in the metaphysics of presence, which is something that Derrida, also Heidegger, but mostly Derrida, gets at, what happened is Aristotle, that guy, a couple thousand years ago, decided he knew what time was. And so he split time arbitrarily into a past, a present, and a future. And then his book on the poetics, he says, well, narrative has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So you have that splitting of the time. And what's happened over the 2,000 years in Western philosophy and European culture and American culture and around the world is the present has taken over what we mean by time. So genuine time, authentic time, right, is considered the present time. And why is that? Because Saussure, as Derrida points out, says when we are speaking like we are now in the present, and you're listening in the present, I'm speaking in the present, oh, that must be more true, more valid than the future or the past, and certainly more valid than writing. So the spoken more valid than the writing, because the writing is about the future that's not here yet, and it's about the past that's gone. And so you hear all these people say, well, only the now has reality, only the present has reality. Well, this is considered not very good thinking. Among those who study this kind of stuff. And so let me change my virtual background and see if I can get a little bit more into this topic area. So, let's try. Hopefully this one is okay. Yeah, okay. So there's a little bit more on it. All right. So when we look at this situation, I'll get out of the way. Derrida develops a construct he calls difference. You notice it's the word differ and then the last part of it that he's put together, ANCE. A lot of people would put a big capital A there, but I wanted you to see it had the word differ in it, and he's making up a new word, difference. Now, in a dictionary, when you look up a word like true, you're going to find like correct and genuine and certifiable and bona fide. But then you got to look up the word bona fide and it'll say, oh, it's the real McCoy, the real deal. And then you look up McCoy, so it's this almost endless loop of one word meaning another word meaning another word. So language, the dictionary, is one definition leads to many others. But language itself, says Derrida, is self-contradictory because you have one definition for true. Like true also means truing up something in a position, like putting one thing in position to the other, the anchor in position to the boat. You're truing up the anchor so it doesn't hit on your boat, which happened to me in Marina del Rey, by the way, and that's another story. That's why my children won't ever sail with me again. So language cannot capture what's true and real. So that's now a lot of people would disagree with that. They say the word was, and the word became flesh, and the word da da da, and then that's real. Okay, that's a belief. That's a belief, but I'm not sure it's certifiable. But anyway, difference marks a path of temporal relationship to differing, a non-identity. So when we're doing storytelling, there's a notion that a true story is connected to the original story or the original experience of something. But as I said in my example about post-traumatic stress, that's a bit questionable. And the space between something, that's part of the A. The A refers to a movement, a disassociation, a space between two or more things, a play of differences, etc., etc. So I will get rid of this thing and share something else. So let's see. Go back to this one. So I'm thinking about this idea of what is a truth teller, and if truth is so kind of hard to get a hold of, then and people will say, well, my opinion, my belief is truth, and we'll go like, well, can an opinion cure cancer? You know, can a belief cure cancer? Well, some people say that that's true, that you can have a belief and it helps be curative. They'll say, well, science has evidence of what can cure cancer or not cure cancer, or the best we know at the time. But like in my example, the prostate, a friend of ours just died in Grace Ann's family, a friend of mine, a family member, and he had the prostate surgery early on, removed the whole thing. And that's what they did in those days. Just everything was surgery. And same for breast cancer. Everything is surgery. But now we got radiation, we got hormone treatment, we got other things. So the facts change as science paradigms change. So that's one of the things I wanted to talk about. So this idea of the difference, I think, is kind of important and deals again with this metaphysics of time. And the idea, if you connect the two together, that only the presence has reality and is where you could find correct truth, that sort of means that we're not going to take account of history. And I think that's quite problematic for a lot of reasons, because we'll focus on the tragedy of the day, and we'll say, oh, if teachers had guns, this wouldn't have happened in the Ohio school shooting. Or if if the parent would have not given the gun to the student, etc. But that denies the whole history of the upbringing of this kid that did the shooting and what was the circumstances and what's going on in that school. Now, one of the historical things about that school is they had every teacher in their name tags has a button now, and it automatically, you push the button, it automatically shows the people in central office where you're located in the school, which room, which gymnasium, are you outside, inside? And so I guess some 60 teachers push their buttons just about at once on hearing the thing. All I'm saying is there's a lot more involved than claiming that the now is the only reality. So that segmenting of reality that Aristotle did is created a number of problems. And his word différance is one way to get at that. Now let me see if I can, let's see, escape or double click to exit full screen. Okay, how do I get out of this? Usually I can figure out things. Okay, so let me bring you all into the discussion of his school. Oh, remove pin, that's what I was looking for. Okay, I'm back. No, I'm not back. Wait a minute. Now I'm back. Okay. All right. So obviously, if there's a correct way to do YouTube, I'm not doing it. So what do you think? Is my theory correct that true puts constraints on a story so that you have to leave out the imagination and some of the embellishment and maybe some of the metaphors to stay with just the facts, like you're on a witness stand, Or if we're doing storytelling, we're creating imagination for everybody, and that's innovative. That's entrepreneurship, Wanda, right? That's creating all of that, but it's not true. My dad was a embellisher,
Wait a minute here.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, because I love this stuff. And I think it does go into the metaphysical. Language itself, there is over 200 figures of speech. You guys are going to get tired of me saying this, with sometimes 40 variations under each one.
Wow.
Figures of speech carry material. It can be more true than the factually correct that we can currently measure. Okay. For example, during a drought, you might say the ground is dry. Factual, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Right? You can infuse that same thing and make it more true by maybe saying the ground is thirsty. So you see the difference there of the light, it connects that which is going on, which we can measure, according to our apparatuses in certain ways and not others, right? But language and figures have a way of carrying more truth than the factual evidence that we can currently measure. Am I making sense, David? So truth itself, when you isolate and separate, right, which is exactly what Aristotle and Plato did. I'm not going to argue with your taking down of Aristotle. One of the underlying messages of my work was to bring Plato and Aristotle down a few pegs, because they got it wrong. And this was also the reason why I did not care for Heidegger's amplification of the fourfold. So sure. You understand where I'm coming from here, but that's a whole other conversation. So remember that metaphors are travelers. They actually carry material. They're like the first television. They carry these images and ideas and the matter itself And that can be more true than what we are currently able to measure. So I'll leave it there. What do you think?
Hmm.
I love it. I love it.
I just, I would like to add that, I agree, David, with, the presence, the focus on the now, the present is cutting out a lot. And, also, like in the school setting you mentioned, right? But I think intertwining histories, right? I mean, you have so many people in a setting, and they each have their history, and these histories and then previous interactions, it all leads to a certain point, right? So the presence on the now, the now is just, I think, a child of several other pasts, shall we say, intertwining histories that, created a new now. So I think it's, intertwining histories creating a now.
I agree. I agree. Let me show you another slide and then let me ask some more questions as we go. Okay, so this one here, this is the familiar six men that are blind, but it could be any sense. And there's an elephant. Now, one of the problems with the illustration, I'll tell you right up front, is there's an elephant. But let's just look at it. If there's a differing, each of the six has in terms of what material aspect of the elephant they're touching, and but our senses are dull anyway. Our sense of touch or seeing, smelling, we don't smell as well as my dogs can smell. They can smell things 50 feet away. I can't, thank goodness. And I can't see like an eagle, but let's accept the illustration here. So each person has a different facet, but they're differing. They're differing. They don't have a common history. They come from different experiences. So that experience is saying, "Oh, I touched the tusk. It's got a pointy thing. Oh, that can only be a sword." Well, obviously their assumptions are not accurate.
Hmm.
By the way, I've been in. People have chased me with guns in Los Angeles. I'm coming out of a church.
Wow.
The guy cut me off, and I gave him a sign. I won't tell you which sign, but it's kind of a pointy sign. And he starts tearing after me in his car, pulls up alongside, and his person in the passenger seat pulls out a gun and sticks it
Oh my
across
God.
into my window. Welcome to Los Angeles. I'm the only one still up in my seat. I'm driving, and everybody else is on the floor. My whole family's on the floor, and one guest. And they're going, "David, don't chase them." Well, of course, I chased them, anyway. But that story we won't go any further with. I'm alive, so obviously I'm alive. Everybody's alive in this story. But eyewitness accounts, I asked everybody when we got home, I said, "Well, what color was the car?" One person said red. One person said yellow. One person said black. One person said it was a pickup. It wasn't a car. None of these eyewitnesses accounts in the present agreed with anything with each other. And they didn't agree with my account. So we just had to give up on the whole notion of reporting the car. Nobody got the license number. People were too. Anyway, maybe I shouldn't go too far on this, but I love this illustration of the elephant and the six blind men because it's about sense making, and we know our sense making is not exact and has a lot of slippage in it. So we think we see or smell or hear things that aren't there or aren't what they are. And it takes the differing. Now, if these six people, if they started to switch positions and they started to share and listen to each other, I believe they could get a closer understanding, even if that was a giraffe or if it was a bushy tree or something. They were trying to figure out what it was. You know what I mean? But you do hear the expression, the elephant in the room. Okay, the elephant is not there, but everybody is sort of stepping around it without getting into truth telling. So let me leave it at that
Mm-hmm.
and come back and ask you all what your thoughts are, or anybody.
Well,
Yeah.
when you show that elephant, David, my first thought was there's an elephant in the room,
Right.
right? And that reflects that even though people know what the truth is, they're not willing to share it. There's a choice of just being silent.
Yeah.
Why? Maybe to avoid conflicts, maybe because they have internal fears, or maybe they have trauma that they're not able to share at this point, which means they're stuck. And then we're getting into, quantum storytelling, the
Yeah.
emotional and volitional phase, people being stuck. When I did my research on leaders in the African diaspora, a lot of them were stuck. And if you're stuck and you're a leader, how are you going to help people in your organization?
I hear you. I hear you. So, have any of you ever been in a situation to tell the truth?
Yeah,
Not
okay.
necessarily.
Yeah,
Go
a
ahead,
court
Mary, if you want to
situation.
do that. Huh?
A court situation
Oh, a
is
court situation, but I'm
where
thinking,
is one of the worst arenas. Okay,
uh-huh.
so you're sworn to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But the questions they ask are designed so that you cannot tell the whole truth.
Right.
So
Good point. Yeah.
at some point, I mean, I because yes, I have been in court, a few times. And at some point, you think, I wish I had been better at figures of speech so that I could answer the question with more truth than the factual basis that they're asking me for. But figures of speech, and you've heard me say this before, have never had a renaissance. Someone has to do the work. And unfortunately, I'm getting elderly, but I'm hoping that someone will tackle it before it goes to the point where it is it's buried.
Okay.
Jerry, I think that you're going to wait a long time. You seem to realize it. Uh, when I lived in Ouagadougou, I was amazed at how they jumped naturally to a greater truth through proverbs
Mm-hmm.
to give a normal answer to me. The question didn't call for what's the truth of life. It was more like you seem to like your job, but the answer came in the form of a proverb about people devoted to. So it's part of their culture, not part of ours. I
Right.
think the interesting thing about ours is that we're super linear. We think that when we're linear, that we're getting at something, when in fact we're just lining up
Mm.
things that may or may not belong together. But as I listened to all of you, I was getting frustrated because Sabine talked about different pasts that become the now. David mentioned his father embellishing stories, but getting his truth out. You've just given the court case, Jerry, and I'm thinking about. Uh, I don't know what I can say on this live stream, but uh, Donald Trump told a story about the beast that carried a lady across the water. And as soon as he did, he turned around and ate her. It was either a snake or something vicious taking her across the water. And he said, "You knew I was a snake when you got on my back." Well, there's a huge truth in that nobody's going to say outright. They're not going to say, I will hurt you if you come near me. But you knew who I was when you got on my back,
Oh
is the
yeah.
greater truth. So you see, you've given all these examples of when the linear facts don't get at the reality that is worth our understanding.
And I definitely think that true storytelling has a place to play here, because linearity, if you recall Cronus time, right? Cronus devoured his own children.
Ouch.
So that is why linear time is called, also known as devouring time.
No.
You see what I'm saying? So
Yes.
how do we get to figures that will bring a wholeness in with multiple billions of times, in that material storytelling?
Can I show you an image, Jerry, and have you
Yes.
comment on it? Okay, and this may not be the favorite image you want, but we'll give it a shot. So here you see an image about figures of speech, simile, metaphor, personification, hyperbole, a word I can't pronounce. I'm going to let you try that. Idiom and proverb. But in my story before we start is I wasn't getting tenure at UCLA, and I was there 6 years, but in the fourth year they said, no tenure, David, the dean told me. And so I was devastated, and I found out later they never had a position for me in the first place. So nobody in that position ever got tenure. It was a kind of revolving door position for new faculty to do all the research for all the other faculty and doctoral students, their dissertations in order, blah, blah, blah. But it wasn't, and I said all the faculty, that's not quite true. Anyway, so I was into the evangelical movement at the time, and now I'm a Jain, so Jain, India. So I took my New International Version, the illustrated version, the Bible, and I opened it to a random page, and and there many of these things on this sheet were there about poetry and about stories and about bits of history and proverbs, etc. So I just want to give you that I've had some experience with this notion, and it was the turning point. A lot of people in academia said, don't ever tell that story, David. You'll never get another job. Well, I did get another job and another job and another job. So that was bullshit. And along with that story goes the story of I wanted a confirmation from God. That's what my belief system was at the time. And so I said, show me that that's what you want me to do, storytelling, and not become an empiricist like these other people that were getting tenure. And so I went down to the cafeteria, which was called Potlatch, by the way, which is kind of a gifting thing.
Oh, wow.
And there was a vending machine and had the Fritos in it, and you had to put your quarter and a dime in, and it had one of those spirally things where bags were hanging on the spiral and it would turn for each 35 cents you put in. Well, my spiral, I put in 35 cents only, and it turned 12 times and I got 12 bags. 12 is one of those biblical numbers. So I said, okay, that's it. I'm only going to do storytelling and teaching, research, and practice forever, or the end of my life. Anyway, so Jerry, tell us about this illustration. Does this capture some of it or any of it?
Okay, so is that the illustration that had the various, like, our sort of favorite known figures of
Simile,
speech?
metaphor, personification,
Yeah,
hyperbole,
yeah. Metonymy is
onomatopoeia.
my favorite. I mean, there's obviously, and I can't, I don't have the wherewithal or the time to go into figures the way that I would like to. Having said that, E.W. Bullinger was the first to document, and this is going to be hopefully interesting to you, document over 200 figures of speech with sometimes 40 variations under each one. and he has an index of those, right? And he got all of those from the the translation of the Bible that he was working with, right? And so and he makes it very clear, that's just what's in the Bible. There are texts in India. There are texts in Greece. There are texts all over the world that have other figures, right? That transmit this matter, this material that is truer than the factual itself. So, if someone were to look into E.W. Bullinger, and I think Ronnie was going to purchase I don't think the book is very expensive now. When I bought it, it was very expensive, and that was many years ago. I think it's because he's dead and because it's an older book, you could probably get it from Abe Books for, I'm just guessing $30 or so. And that literally is a book of the entire index. Once you start going through that, it'll kind of drive your mind crazy, but David, you're probably up for it, right?
I thought you were going to say you're already crazy. So,
but no. You're probably up for it because the figures do specific things. It is a specific form of language, right? A specific way of speaking and writing too. Yes, that's it. E.W. Bullinger. That's exactly right. Okay, so he'll go into the exact figures and how the language itself is almost like a geometry. So, you might really enjoy it. I think there are probably sections available online because Ronnie was telling me something that he had found in it. And then the next thing that I would say is he did perhaps the best work on numbers that I have ever seen.
Cool. Very nice.
Yeah, and yet that is not my religion. I'm going to be upfront with you. I am like Derrida. I question the Abrahamic root religions. Christianity, Judaism, Islam. I question all of them because to me it's that Plato and Aristotle of putting the greater on the outside. You know what I'm saying? That spiritual on the outside. And I think there's more to that. So I think it's material. I think it's, like I said, with the word joy and work having that same root. That's an inside thing.
Okay.
So I'm so sorry. I don't mean to, I'm sorry. You guys always get me going, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
David, I have a thought.
I'm happy. Thank you. Go ahead, Wanda.
When you said you were told, David, do not tell that story or you will not get another job.
That's correct. That's a true story.
Yeah, my thought was truth telling is not only focusing on past stories.
No.
When I was up for full faculty rank, okay, which is kind of a similar system to tenure because you have to make an application and it's kind of arduous.
Oh, yeah.
I was told, you'll never get it because it's like parting the Red Sea, basing it on other people's experiences from the past. And like yourself, okay, I kind of stand on your shoulders, David. I don't know that you realize this. Like yourself, my response was, well, I guess I'm a Red Sea parting sister then.
Nice.
Because if I don't apply, I'll never know, even if they turn me down. So why is it that people in I don't know if it's refusing to accept true storytelling or just staying in the past and basing other people's experiences or courage on other people's past experiences?
Yeah. When I've done truth telling, for example, there was a lady that was in the administration of a university from New Mexico that I was in, and she was interim president. And then she decided to run for president, and they figured out that she could.
Mm-hmm.
Well, some of the opponents accused her of doing a fundraiser for her candidacy
Okay.
while she was still interim or something like that. I don't have every detail right, but I do know that we had student demonstrations out, student marches and banners outside the administration office. There was not a single faculty person that was willing to speak up. So I jumped on the bench in front of the media and people with their cameras and all that, and I gave a speech on why I thought she would be a great candidate and what she had done. For example, she had brought people around to each college and a lot of the departments, including ours, that worked in different parts of the university that were heads of facilities and heads of the computer programs and heads of learning, etc. And I had never met these people. And we were introduced to them for the very first time. And I had been there, I would say almost going on 20 years and never met. And she wanted a collaborative. She reminds me of Kamala Harris, that she wanted to have this unity. She wanted participation by people in the administration with the faculty and students. You know what I mean? Not this closed door behind. I don't want to go on about my speech, but it was, I was glad I did it. And she and I exchanged Christmas cards every year. She went to another university and became president of that university instead of, and we got some of the worst series of presidents, in my opinion. This is an opinion, so it's not true. But if I verify it, it would be true, maybe. So,
well, I mean, David, and Wanda, you're both talking about courage and confidence. And, the linear definitely strips us of confidence, and it often strips us of courage. Now that I'm older and I'm facing a brand new, viewpoint in my life, right? I look back and I wish there had been a way in my time period, right, to be more courageous and more confident. That confidence was a key to unlocking the courage. Does that?
Yeah.
And so I really love this conversation.
well, thank you, Jerry. Thank you very much. Love your input. Love all your input. So any input from Brazil is appreciated.
Right?
We only had somebody
We're
from
the new
Brazil
doctor.
here. I learned that they have a dozen political parties in Brazil, Jean Marcos, and that I can't imagine what a meeting is like with a dozen different political parties. Yeah, but, he's not saying anything. He's smiling. Okay.
David, I would
Well,
like to
David,
comment, please, if I may. And you said willingness to speak up, that may not be there. But I also, in conjunction with it, I think there's also sometimes pressure to say something like, the witness type of situation, where you feel you want to contribute something, even though you may not be sure. And then that ties into a question. When people say, I have to ask my David about this. If people say, well, the car was red, it's like, do people really believe it and just remember it wrong? Are they aware? Is it like, I guess what strikes me is there any doubt in all of this when we do these things? Oh, the car was red. Are we really convinced of this?
Yes. Well, now, a good thing Ronnie was here, because if we say the car is red, it's an eyewitness account to when somebody pulled a gun on me in another car, and it's in Los Angeles. So, but according to quantum physics, Ronnie, isn't it true that we're not seeing red at all, and that this is some sort of quantum mystery to have color? If that's putting you on the spot.
Wait. That's heading into Newtonian separatism again.
Okay, so okay. I won't be funny because Ronnie's thinking.
Because so far the metaphors are all and all of that we've been talking about, our favorites that need to come to life again, all reside with Memnosine and the Nine Muses.
Okay.
So
Memnosine
when
and
you
Nine
talked
Muses.
about Trump having the theater, that was attractive, the drama, right? That is, yes, a certain training for the theatrical, right?
Mhm.
But it's also why we can have the ability to counter with our own figures, with our own designs of true storytelling, to transmit something truer than what people think of as fact. So I'm sorry that, various people saw the car as red, blue, yellow, and
Well, this is personal for me because I'm colorblind, and these
right.
reds, browns, blues, and greens are kind of. Now I can tell a spotlight, and I see a color, but I don't see the same color that probably you all are seeing. My color
Mhm.
is a different hue of red because people tell me when I'm coloring that's the wrong choice of red, David. That's the wrong choice of green. And they have a rule book. They have a rule book on colors somewhere. And I'm always in violation of this secret rule book, you know.
Well,
Hi,
I
Ron.
mean, and how, when just made me think of, all the artists. I mean, they use that, color strategically, right, to get certain effects and certain reactions from people. I mean, this whole Newtonian, color theory.
No, that's a composition. This is multiples at work in artwork.
Oh, sure.
That's a composition.
Yeah,
That
but I mean,
is,
an environment is also, I mean, you have,
yeah,
I mean, I think when you, let's say the cars, right? I mean, you have a lot of elements in an environment as well. I mean, one is random, shall we say, which cars happen to be there. But, I think it's true, but I mean, composition encompasses color composition, but of course also the shape and spatial composition.
right.
So I mean, it's all of that, right? And then circumstances, lights, right? I mean, was the car in the shade? Was it in the sun? Was it, and the surrounding, reflections? And was it twilight? I mean, you've up and out, right? When you're on the road in twilight, that's one of the hardest things to really make things out, because the light is just so different.
I think these people were scared to death. That's why they were on the floor of the car.
Oh,
They had like a little glimpse and they didn't want to see. But Ronnie, let me bring you up to date. Behind me, you see on my screen what is the metaphysics of presence, Derrida, for example. And his review of Aristotle took time and said, well, we're going to just divide it into three parts. We're going to separate these parts. There'll be the present. That's very important. And there's the past, and then there's the future. And then in the poetics, he says, when we have the beginning, middle, and end. And in the next 2,000 years, people start saying, well, only the now is where you can have reality, because that's where you can have sense making. And Ronnie, sense making, Carl Weick, enactment, different between enactment and what's true, right, there's a pretty big gap there. But people say, well, if I have the ability to speak to people and have conversations like on Zoom here, then I'm close to what's true. But if we're talking about the past or the future, nah. And if it's writing, spoken word, so sure, more important than written, and then Derrida reversed all that. So that's kind of where we're at a little bit. We've had a good discussion of figures of speech along with that, and whether one point that was raised is I was saying that to be true is to be accurate and correct and fact-based and evidence-based and forensic and all that. And storytelling isn't about any of those things because it tries to be imaginative and innovative and embellish so that the audience will take it in many different directions based on their experience.
So
But I got corrected that that's not just right, David. And I'm so glad I got corrected because there are times when I will tell a story and I will embellish it a little bit here and there to get to the point for time, to get an effective communication. And I think I get a better understanding than if I filled in 1,000 details.
Right, exactly.
So I don't know. That's where we are, Ronnie.
Wow.
So on one level, of course, you could use biology, Newtonian physics to describe how light interacts with cells in rods and cones. But on another level, and then people would tell you what's objective about light and the color. Oh, well, it's this wave, right? And where it is on the spectrum. And they say, well, each color has a place on the spectrum. Except that's not true. Here is a color that doesn't exist. You've seen it before. This doesn't exist. This is not a color on the spectrum, along with pink and brown.
Mm.
They just don't exist as that objective Newtonian reality
Mhm.
when it comes to the wavelength. There is no wavelength for this, is what I mean by that. So if your reality is only wavelengths are colors, this color doesn't exist.
Oh,
But we know it exists because we're seeing it. So there's something more to our reality than this objectification through the measurability. And then we
Yeah.
have to get to,
Nicely said.
yeah.
good
And
point.
then,
Yeah,
make sense?
absolutely, Ronnie. And I think true, right? I mean, we use, in art, I mean, we use color for emotion, I mean, it elicits particular emotions, and we know this, and artists use that. So it is clearly more than just, a wavelength, and I think there's a reason why hospital rooms often are painted green and, why we like to be by the ocean. And, I mean, there's more to it than just the scientific aspect
Yeah,
to all of
and that is such a great explanation, because if we don't have the apparatus to measure something, right, then of course it's not in our truth field, right? Having said that, it's just so funny to me. Okay, so one of the oldest experimental apparatuses is language, and then writing as well. And so that is why I think that unearthing and utilizing as much as we possibly can figures of speech, because they carry matter, they carry material, right? We've somehow forgotten that that's one of the original experimental apparatuses for human beings.
Well, and I've been.
I can't hear you guys. Oh.
I'm currently also. I mean, I think it's interesting because I've been, been reading and listening, learning about, ancient Egypt, and so I learned that the letters were largely phonetic, but then the symbols are actually pictures.
Mhm.
you know, so I mean, it's not like a clear, you know, division even, you know, when you look at the hieroglyphics, you know, it's sound, but these are little pictures, literally, you know, that connect with the sound. It's not, you know, abstracted like, you know, that many of ours are, you know, but they might be like, you know, a little bird or, you know, an arm and things like that, you know, that represent sounds. So very
Mhm.
concrete things
Mhm. Mhm.
representing sounds.
And I do think of hieroglyphics. I mean, when I was looking into the Korean language, and this was quite a long time ago. I mean, I'm a total fan of the Korean dramas right at the moment, but that's, you know, this was a long time ago because they were one of the first to get writing, okay, to have a phonetic system, right? And yet they retained something of the pictorial glyphs, right?
Mm-hmm.
That the images, right, within the writing. And I think there's something pretty spectacular there. I'm not going to be able to get into all of that. I wasn't able to, but it is fascinating what you're saying, Sabine.
I mean, I'm completely entrenched now in all
Mhm,
this
mhm.
mythology and the gods and the writing,
Well,
you
and
know,
see,
that express themselves.
mythology was the thing that Plato wanted to get rid of and replace with his own mythology, right? Aristotle did the same thing, right? And I cannot remember her name, but I think her name was Stephanie. She asked me at the conference last year. She said, "How do we build myth again?" You know, and I just think I'm absolutely fascinated with her question.
I can see that, Jerry, you know, and I think how do we build myth in an age when the scientific and, as David said, factual, verifiable, so to speak. You know, I mean, there's a
Mhm.
definition of what's acceptable in a
I'm
particular.
not sure we want to throw that away, you
So
know. So how do we
I'm not
incorporate
saying that either,
and
but I think it's a matter of how we value things. You know, I
Mhm.
mean, of course
Can
we
I?
need science, right? I mean, we need science, we need, you know, I mean, I'm all for that. But at the same time, you know, there is value in carrying. I think I agree with you totally. There's value and meaning carried and in myth, but I think it's also a binding thing, you know, something that holds people together, you know, a culture together.
Let me try an example here. Get turn this a little bit. Um, you see behind me, and I'll show you the image here so you can see it. There you go. So I started reading the book called Glass, G-L-A-S. Glass translates from French to clang, like the clanging of a bell. That's why there's a bell up here. And so the question I'm raising is true plus storytelling possible. But I happen to, like I do, I open to random pages, and it's about apparatus, Jerry. So I thought you would like this. Higher up apparatus was the name for Stilitano's generative organ, the place of elaboration for his luminosity, his phanerogamy. So one penetrates oneself with a representation sewn in the text or facing the text, rather regarding it impassively, severely, like the remains of the Rembrandt, for example. But there are so many others. The seam, the couture of what you will call le pénétrate, the signifier to be searched through in every sense, overlaps itself, se recoupe here more than once. And Betty will correct my French, I'm sure.
No, that was beautiful. Beautiful.
First, a pictorial representative, an iconic text, the tapestry, is appliqued on a narrative or discourse text, one piece in the other, as in the example in The Maids. So in this text, what Derrida does is he has two columns and then he'll have inserts,
Mhm.
like the Talmud, little notes, and it's two different texts together, and one is about Hegel and the other is about John Gannett, and there's a lot of discussion of Jewishness and Jewish traditions,
Mhm.
etc. in the one. So it's interesting the juxtaposition of Hegel and Gannett. So the book is absolutely fascinating. I never see this book kind of talked about in the YouTubes. Everybody goes to grammaticology and a couple of other little essays and they stop. But the glass book, I've had it a long time and I really appreciate it. So I invite you to check it out. But what I'm getting from Is True Plus Storytelling Possible is if you look at it as a tapestry and interstitching, a weaving of the two, then I think it is possible. If you look at one dominating the other, as I've been
Mhm.
talking about so far on purpose, I've been talking about it as a separation. Wrong of me, I know, but it starts off the presentation. But now if we stitch them together, and we've been hitting on a little bit that you can begin to use certain figures of speech, certain kinds of, I often use a story where I say, you know, and pause and let people fill in the blanks. Now, the thing is, people are filling in those blanks very differently. So, you know, when you had to tell the truth, if I go like that, and your father confronted you. So, everybody pretty much has that kind of experience, but those experiences are going to be 6 different ones here, and in the YouTube out there, it's going to be 1,000 different ones. But yet there's an essential communication going on about a relationship of a son or a daughter to father and what that's like. And you know what I'm saying? And it does give access to an experience. Whereas if I give too many details, I think it cuts off
Mhm.
the listener from stitching in with it, if that makes any sense. That's what I get out of Glass on that
Well,
section.
this is definitely one that I have not read, and so thank you, David. I think the quote that you read, I was very interested when Derrida said generativity, right? Because that's not something that's really focused on, and in our culture, in the ways that we tend to speak, trying to do window pane or, linguistic turn kinds of speaking. But I'm very interested in where he went there because he doesn't, in my reading, and I've read quite a lot of his work, he doesn't talk specifically about generativity. I had to go into my J. Hurd to get that. But this is also, he talked, that quote that you used, perfect quote, also is where it leads us to complementarity, like what you were just talking about. People
Mhm.
filling in the gaps, even though it's different, there's something that brings about complementarity when they do fill in the gaps. And there's always gaps. I mean, that is one thing that Derrida did teach us.
Absolutely. I learned a lot about deconstruction, even though he denies he's a deconstructionist. And there's a lot of good YouTubes out there, not all the same, by the way, about deconstruction. But I went back to the 8 steps I used to teach with Ronnie in the small business class. And then Grace Ann right away said, David, there's no steps in deconstruction. You got to stop using steps. That's very linear. And I go, oh God, I didn't even get to tell you what I did. But anyway, I've noticed that there's, I think I do a lot of deconstruction, naturally,
Yes.
pulling out the dualities, reversing the terms, the untold story, the other side of the story, the exception, etc. But the point I want to get to is the resituation. And dissertations I've supervised or been a part of, and they're doing this kind of deconstruction work. I say, well, the resituation is it, because that's where you're stitching things back together. That's where you're trying to make it whole again in some new fantastic way that works for people and nature and whatever you're doing. And I that's the part I don't see in these videos. They don't seem to do resituation. They seem to, oh, we'll destruct and we'll separate the dualities, or we'll talk about, is religion true, or is Derrida got the right
Well,
perspective?
I
You know,
do
it's just
think that the
degenerate.
feminist materialists,
Yeah, yeah.
the critical theorists, right? The Black movement,
Uh-huh.
I think they do give us generativity in ways that we really need. Does that make some sense?
Yeah.
I mean, and yeah, that's what I got.
Okay. And so,
Are you guys familiar with the concept of critical race theory?
Yeah,
oh,
oh yes.
we love it. We
God,
love it.
very
Let-
controversial.
Let me
I love it.
let me show you something that's very controversial. This is by Professor Jody Armour. He is a Black critical race theorist, and he wrote a book, and it is about the social construction of, for example, Black people as murderers. That is to say, when a Black person is arrested, charged, and convicted for murder, how that is socially constructed and constructed differently if it were a white woman who did exactly the same thing. And perhaps, and also quite evocatively, and maybe the spiciest meatball I've ever eaten, this is the name of his book.
But I can't read it. Read it
Yeah.
to me.
It says it's inward theory.
Inward theory.
But he spells out with a at the end. And so, and his point is that the way the legal system works is it treats Black people like they're on a continuum as to whether, and always presupposes they're, I'll call them bad Black people. He uses other words, and until they can prove that they are good Black people.
Right. Right.
And then he goes into great detail about the rhetorical flourishes that are used in order to push people into those categories. To me, though, there's a greater theory here of blame. And I have always taken for granted the word blame. And I feel like there's something inside of this conceptualization and enactment of blame that's completely missing from our study of social rituals.
Mm.
So
Cool.
blame and accusation, maybe, or what are you?
Yeah, I'm not sure. There's some sort of storytelling process that happens when we think we can blame, right? Like it feels like we're severing.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Right? I think it seems to me that blame is a cheat, and it creates this world of Newtonian broken apartness instead of recognizing the constant interconnectivity. And in a way, it's a way of severing yourself from a reality that you're always a part of, you know?
Right.
Anyway, but that's a very spicy meatball.
Yeah, no, it's great stuff, Ronnie. I mean, I'm glad you brought it to us today. That's great stuff, you know.
Yeah.
Well, Ronnie,
Very good.
I have something that may relate to critical race theory, and you tell me if you think it does. I just lost my Chihuahua.
Oh, sorry.
He's 17. He was 17 years old, and you know, he went from walking 2 miles with me to maybe a half a mile maximum. You know, he was getting older, and he was kind of like my emotional support dog. I got him in 2009 because my doctor said, "You need a pet because you are high stress." He lived to be 17 years old, and you know, he kept wandering off. And we found him twice. I think he would wander off and just forget how to get back home. Well, my neighbor found him the second time in the barn with her horse.
Oh,
I'm calling my neighbor Karen. You familiar with the concept of friends? Okay. Everybody familiar with that concept?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, anyway,
not sure I
she
know.
blasted me. She blasted me. She accused me basically of not caring for my dog. Now, this dog lived to be 17 years old. All right. So
Jeez.
obviously I'm caring for him, right? Then she I went to my husband and I said, you know what? It's good I'm a spiritual woman because I almost blasted her, but I just let her go, right? And he said, well, Wanda, she's lost 3 horses.
Oh,
You didn't make the assumption that she wasn't caring for her horses. And I said, she did? He said, yeah, because I went over there to help her. So I was like, isn't this interesting? Now, on the other side of the fence is the Black community. I had my dog cremated. He's in a beautiful little wooden box. He has a cremation certificate. And as I'm sharing it with my Black colleagues, they say, well, I just would have thrown him in the ground.
ouch.
I'm just like, this is so unempathetic. You went through all that. How much did you pay for it? I said, you know what? I had my dog 17 years. I don't care how much I paid for it. This was special to me. He's on my mantle. That was my buddy.
Mm-hmm.
So, I just wanted to share that with you.
Mhm.
You got 2 different perspectives here,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
which is
Yeah.
very interesting.
Thank you, Wanda.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for the
What?
loss that you, I mean, that is, they do become part of you. And I
They
mean,
do. They're part of the family.
come on,
I
right?
have pictures of them.
Oh, of
So
course.
Wanda, I'm interested in knowing what you felt when the Black community ridiculed you or mocked you. I mean, was that the same violence as someone accusing you of not caring?
That's a good question. It's like you can't win for losing. I still have his rug in my office. I'm not going to move it. It has a shape of a doggy bone, which I bought him because he liked being in my office while I worked.
Oh,
Mhm.
that's so sweet.
Yeah. So I'm just like, you can't win for losing, Jerry. You're going to be attacked either way.
But
Yeah.
and I definitely think, okay, so Bakhtin gets into how certain kinds of humor can actually be devastating to people, right? The mockery, like Rabelais in his world, right? The carnivalesque, I mean, there's all kinds of, but in the book that we all loved a couple of months ago, I'm sorry, I have it on my shelf again. He actually goes into, pastiche and parody, and he goes into what he calls the grim.
Oh,
Okay, and so it's not just one side of mockery. Like maybe it was something they couldn't handle, but was that as violent as the woman who said you aren't a caring person? Because that narrative is a potent white supremacist sort of
Yes.
narrative.
oh,
So you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I tried to keep it in perspective because she lost her husband several years ago to prostate cancer.
Oh,
Okay, he was at, a high level, like 9.
whoa.
And during that time, we were very kind to them. I would take meals over, Christmas presents. We were at the funeral celebrating birthdays because he had good days and bad days.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting there saying, it's interesting how she kind of lost sight of that altogether.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I just became this uncaring, not my husband, it's
Right.
both of our dog, but me specifically.
I think that's so interesting. I mean, because there's gender shit in there.
Yeah.
There's racial stuff. I mean, this is okay. So, and that's why specifically I think that Black women have more to teach us than Black men. I'm sorry
Yeah.
to say that, but I
Yeah.
really do. I believe
Oh, we're
that.
gonna get a lot of mail now.
You know,
Yeah.
but Wanda, I think that, you know, I'm, you know, I'm not sure how many people in the Black community like did this mockery of, oh, I would have just thrown him in the whatever,
In a hole,
you know,
and dig it.
but I don't know which is more violent. You know, have they been so violated that now they're taking on the white narrative structure?
Yeah.
Because that's very, very real.
That's what I thought too, Jerry.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and I've just, and Friday, the contract that ended Friday, we had a faculty meeting, and apparently one of the seniors' husbands killed the wife.
Oh my.
Oh no.
And it's been in the news.
Oh
So
my.
I'm sitting there as a bereaved parent listening to this.
Right.
And I'm like, does the principal even realize the trauma of people in the audience and how they may be sensitive to this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I left. I had to be back there at 12:15 to teach, but between 11, what was it? No, 9:30 and 12:15, I left and went to the prayer center because it kind of got to me.
Yeah.
You know, I knew the kid, and I was there, and it really helped. It really helped. You know, you talk about David. You said you're into Janieism now, and
Yep.
I've gone from, you know, this is a world prayer center, which is why I've chosen it.
Nice, Wanda.
And
Wow.
I'm trying to commit to praying an hour a day. And they have
nice.
different clergy that come through there. You know, it probably sounds like mass confusion, but my soul just needs to have different perspectives right now, and definitely needs to be praying on a daily basis. Because there's just so much meanness in the world, and anger.
Oh yeah.
You know what I don't understand, Wanda, is, you know, that, you know, you had this warm relationship, right, with your neighbor, you know, presence and food and all of. I mean, what shocks me about this is it's like with one fell swoop, you know, how can that history just be like erased as if it never happened? You know, it's like, I mean, I find that so shocking. Did that all mean nothing? Also, I feel like they know you, right? I mean, they should at this point know you better than that, you know, and to just make that accusation, you know, it's like all of a sudden, it's like, where did that just come from? That's our whole history. They know you as a person. They know you as a caring, loving person.
Right.
You know, so I mean, and so, I mean, to have that come out of nowhere, you know, like a lightning bolt.
Mm-hmm. I think people are dealing with their own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, this is what I walked away from the prayer center with. Sometimes people are dealing with their own stuff and they need a target.
Oh.
And there's also, you know, an education factor there, Wanda, where people, you know, raised with certain narratives, and even in our society, the structural narratives that exist, right? And Adorno's hegemony is I'm there, you know. She reached back into a familiar narrative that cut you, right?
Yeah.
But so did the Black community. They reached into us, you know, something on the spectrum of that particular narrative that
Mhm.
also cut you. It ridiculed you in
Mhm.
a negative way.
Mhm.
I have witnessed women that have taken on patriarchy, right? They've embodied it, and tried to, like literally destroyed other women,
Mhm.
right? So I don't, God, you're so brilliant. I love it every time I talk to you.
Yeah. And this morning I got up, I went to the prayer center. I'm trying to commit to it daily because it really makes a difference.
Yeah, that's
We did
so
meditation today.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, right. It really makes a difference. But
Well,
thank
I
you for
need
letting me
to
share that.
take this wonderful, beautiful discussion and put in a little commercial for unthinkment.com and then close it out because we're online.
Sure.
We're on live YouTube. So, but let me say that if you want to learn more about what we're doing or you want to participate, go to unthinkment.com. And we are actually thinking about things. We call it enthinkment as opposed to enactment, but you can learn about that at our website. And it gives you the details of how every Tuesday, 1 o'clock Mountain Time, New Mexico, we join together. And if you want to join us from whatever country you're in, you're more than welcome. So
Okay.
we have had a wonderful discussion here about the metaphysics of presence. So can we have true storytelling together, figures of speech, and different situations we've been in where we've had to speak truth. Speaking truth with love, I think, is the most important of all of those. I think it's. I got some YouTubes up here at the channel quantum-storytelling.com, where a couple I did recently was on the ways of deconstruction and Derrida, and how I use them in organizations. Did one on how to combine true and storytelling together, and a little bit one on the glass book by Derrida and some of his work. Now I wanted to close with an example. This might open up more conversation, but I don't know. One of the speaking truth and love thing I cover in the video I did on YouTube and getting pretty good play is my daughter in high school. She came home and said, "Dad, I want to do this thing my girlfriends and I did in high school today." I said, "Oh, okay, what is it?" "Well, I got a talking stick and I'm going to have this talking stick and we're going to talk to you, Dad. We're going to lovingly talk to you." And this was her, my two sons, and my wife at the time. And she died. She passed away, by the way. And I'm remarried. Anyway, so she sort of says, "Dad, you're drinking a lot." And I started to respond. She says, "No, you don't have the stick. I have the stick. I get to talk. You only get to listen." And so
Oh.
then she says, "You're drinking a lot lately,
Uh-oh.
and you seem kind of perturbed a lot, and we can't get you away from your computer. I don't, I just wondered maybe it's time to rethink some of these things." And then she passed it on to my eldest son. And I said, "Well, I can respond to that." And my daughter said, "No, you won't respond. He will tell you what's on his heart, and you will listen." And then it went to my younger son, and then to my wife. And whoa, that was a lot to deal with. It was a lot to deal with, but I believe it was kind of good to get authentic understanding of where they were coming from, and then to take that personal inventory. So anyway, I wanted to share that we have videos, good content. We also meet live and have good discussions. So anything you want to say, Paul, before we go?
You're muted.
He's talking in.
Hi, Paul.
Hello.
Hello, that's it? Okay, well, that's really good. I thought you were going to tell me what that color was that Ronnie showed because I didn't recognize that color at all. So,
Was Ronnie on earlier? I just came.
yeah, no, you showed me something. I thought, is that pink or is that red? I don't know, like, I'm not sure.
Okay,
Purple.
I now have something to say. You triggered something.
Oh,
I always ask my wife when there is a color visible, like that one behind you. Oh, well, that's purple. And sometimes we get into an argument about fuchsia and puce and all of this. And I go, we have to find some Martha Stewart place that will answer the question about what are we going to call this color, anyhow. So the color behind you, I'm going to say is purple. But behind Wanda, that is more mysterious, which is on my left. I don't know. How did we get into this? This is not terribly important.
thank you all. Really have a wonderful day and shared a lot of personal stories I did and you did. And we hope everybody received them in a good way. And
Yeah.
join us at unthinkment.com and Tuesday. All right. And thank you all.
Thank
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Enjoy the debate watching.
You.
Yes.
Oh,
the
I am
debate
so,
tonight.
can I say
Oh,
I'm scared for Kamala Harris to be there with that guy. I'm just so scared.
Well,
Well,
we know what.
she's kind of a beast as a prosecuting attorney.
Yeah.
Right. And we know that the debate structure is really ridiculous. I mean, to have him, perhaps, open mics, I think it's ridiculous. No audience.
Yeah.
Terrible choice there, because you need the audience for, that sort of feedback.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But we
He's
know
my
that he's
heart's
going
pounding.
to continue to run over her lie after lie after lie. And there's no way that she can pivot to every lie. She would be a whirling dervish if she
Right.
did.
Well, it's just the personal assaults that I believe she's going to receive, It's
Well,
just such a form
hear,
of violence, I
It
can't.
is.
I did
It
hear
is.
something about her being strategic in pausing before she responds.
Mhm, mhm.
Betty's shaking her head. And
Yeah,
that is a
Wanda, you
real
got it.
smart thing to do.
Yeah,
Mhm.
she's very smart. I have no doubt that what she will do is
Don't
occasionally pivot to address one of his lies, which she has 1 minute to respond
right.
to, right? And maybe address that in that 1 minute, and then
Mhm.
pivot to her main message, which
Right.
is clarity has to win over chaos.
Right.
That's what we have to do.
Yeah, you got to avoid allowing yourself to be escalated.
Yeah.
Well,
But I'm
Nice,
not
anyway,
worried.
nice.
I hope that she engages in some true storytelling, and I hope
Okay.
we can all agree that maybe we're going to see some non-true storytelling from the other
It's
candidate.
going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
It
So
will.
we'll all
Yeah.
see.
Okay, love you guys.
Bye
I'll
now.
go
Okay.
first.
See
I'm
you
going to
next
count
week.
down. And
Bye-bye.
bye
Take care.
now. 1, 2,
Bye.
4.
Bye, Professor Boje. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
bye.
And I'm going to sign out. But Wanda, I'd like to do an interview with you at some point and get that.
Okay.
Hi, Paul. You're on mute again. And he's gone. Okay. But anyway,
Okay.
so just let me know in a text or something. You got my phone number, I think, 575-936-9578. And I'm pretty flexible if you get
Okay.
20 minutes. I'll say 20 minutes, but I know it's going to be longer.
Okay. Okay.
Catch some of the early days. And
Okay.
that was cute what you said about Tanya before we started. That was interesting.
Yeah.
Because she
Tanya.
would call me back.
But you're
and say, "Oh, I
you're
don't
gonna
know."
cut that out, right?
What's that?
You're
Oh,
gonna cut
I
that out,
wasn't
right?
recording. I wasn't recording then. That was
Okay.
before we recorded.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, I try not to have those.
Okay. Because that, I mean, that's my buddy, but she can be a little intense.
She's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of wanted to resurrect this TED talk she did because it got kind of torn up and thrown out of the conference we did in Los Angeles, and I just felt so devastated by that. And I know she did. I know people from CTU did, and
Well,
but
you know her. What was it, Joanne?
yeah, Joanne Preston.
Yeah, Tanya and Anton.
Yeah.
Uh, they were supposed to do a PDW on how to get into the ODJ journal, and it
Oh
did
yeah.
not get accepted. I was really surprised by that.
Yeah, it's
I
I'm
was very
well,
surprised
the
by that.
politics changes from year to year to year to year, and
Mm.
it might have got in the consultation division easier than ODC. ODC has its own politics. ODC is pretty much appreciative inquiry right now, so at least it was in the years I was attending.
Okay, well, the journal ODJ was the PDW, not the journal, was
Yeah.
rejected by management consulting, was my understanding.
Oh, is it by MC? Okay. Well,
Yeah.
maybe. Yeah, it just varies year to year what they're going to do, and um, I don't know. I don't go anymore.
Yeah, I hear you.
Anyway, I got other things to do. I'd rather go take a walk along the lake and sit and meditate, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
That's
Love you, Wanda.
okay. You too,
Let
Dave.
me send you my love symbols here. So here you go.
Okay. All righty.
All right.
Well,
Bye
take
bye.
care.
Have a wonderful day. Call me
You too.
anytime. Give me a text when you're ready.
All righty. Bye bye.
Bye.